So thank you all very much for connecting. We are extremely excited to welcome today Professor Dongping Fang and Professor Nan Li from Tsinghua University School of Civil Engineering to talk about human-centered and data-driven approaches to enhancing urban resilience. But before I completely introduce the new two speakers for today, I would like, just as we have now become common, give you a little bit of feedback of what on the chair activity for the past months. The last month, at the beginning of the month, I had the opportunity to attend the Transforming Knowledge for Africa Future, the International Forum on UNESCO Chairs and Partners that was convened by the African Union Commissions at Addis Ababa. This was a unique opportunity where more than 400 UNESCO chairs contributed to look at what is the outlook and the future for higher educations in Africa. And as you can see here, this is the resolution of the event to push what is called Campus Africa forwards, and looking at 3 pillars for actions, which will look at research, innovation capacity, doctoral studies, and higher technical educations in 3 major areas: agriculture, renewable energies, and technologies. You will hear us speaking more about this in the coming months as we get also involved in some of these activities. Very recently, on the same issue of educations and the way in which engineering capacity is trained and what capability exists worldwide, we have contributed to a paper presented by ICSI, the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure, recently in New York. And you can read more about this very interesting position paper at the web on the link below, but we will also add this link on our website. Very quickly, moving on, recently, Dr. Yasmin Akhtas and Dr. Zheishan Li participated at one of the frontier symposiums organized by the Royal Academy in combination with Australian Academy of Technological Science and Engineering in Perth, again at the beginning of the month. And the theme of this was empowering resilience, integrating innovation, sustainable community, and climate adaptation strategies. This is very much linked to the theme of the UNESCO chairs, and through the networking and sandpits that went on at that particular event, we are now looking forward to engage in further research activities. Finally, we have also done some capacity building at home, and we had as host a group from AFAD. AFAD is the national organization or national authority in Turkey that looks after civil protection. And they were here for 4 days to learn more about risk reduction strategies in cultural heritage. But now, without further ado, before I go on, we have the upcoming webinar courses for the next sessions. As you can see, we have now 4 more until February 2025. I will not go into details on this, but you can read more on our website as usual. And we look forward to meeting many of you at these future events. But now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Professor Dongping Fang. Is the Dean and Professor of the School of Civil Engineering at Tsinghua University. He's also serving as Deputy Director of Tsinghua Institute for Future Cities and Infrastructures. Professor Fang specializes in construction safety and urban resilience, and he has developed a cognition-based leadership culture behavior approach for construction safety and a trio space framework, physical, societal, and cyber, for urban resilience. Professor Fang has authored over 200 papers in peer-reviewed academic journals and has been recognized as a world top 2% scientist by Stanford for 5 consecutive years, and a highly cited Chinese researchers by Elsevier for 10 consecutive years. From 2013 to 2016, he was the vice president of the International Council for Research and Innovation in Building and Constructions, the CIB, and he currently serves as a member of the board and its program committee. We also have the pleasure to introduce Professor Nan Li, who's associate professor and assistant dean at the School of Civil Engineering, Tsinghua University. He is also director of the Institute for Sustainable Urbanization at Tsinghua. And Dr. Li's research focuses on understanding and improving the resilience of the built environment, including building infrastructure systems and human whose needs they serve, by extensive application of advanced informatic and computational approaches. His research has produced over 100 academic publications, which have received over 6,500 citations. Dr. Li currently serves as associate editor of Advanced Engineering Informatics and Journal of Management in Engineering, and they also part of the editorial board of several other leading journals. He is also a board member of the International Association for Automation and Robotics in Constructions. So again, I warmly welcome both Professor Dongping Fang and Professor Nan Li, and I then stop sharing my screen as Professor Fang will start his talk.
Okay, thanks, Dina. Is it the time for my turn?
Yes, it is. Please.
Okay, so can you see the sharing screen of mine, and the voice is clear, right?
Everything is clear. The voice is clear.
Okay.
Ready to
Good afternoon, or good evening, or good morning, all over the world. First of all, I would like to thank Dina for the invitation for me and Dr. Nan Li to be able to share what we have done in the recent years on urban resilience. Today, I will focus on the people-centric approach that we developed for improving urban resilience. So this is the outline of this lecture in 4 parts. First, let's start from the background. As you all know, urbanization was the world trend in the past and will continue in the future. So, because we still have more developing countries than developed countries. And as for China, 70% of Chinese cities and 50% of Chinese people are located in natural disaster-prone areas. So every year, our people suffered with earthquake, flooding, and geologic hazards here and there. So resilience is very important for our cities. There are different concepts concerning resilience, from the psychological aspect, from ecological aspect, engineering, and social ecological resilience. So you can see different people from different angle may define resilience a little bit differently. However, rather than there are differences, but there's a common concept with resilience. Thus, recover. So recover become a very important feature for resilience as a concept. So as for urban resilience, so the definition also changes from time to time. However, it is definitely defined as the ability for either a community or a city to mitigate and recover from the shock of the disasters. So we also had defined the urban resilience in a paper in 2017. Unfortunately, it's in Chinese, but there's an abstract for English. So there's some key words in terms of urban resilience. First of all, ability. This is the intrinsic property of a system for resilience. And function or functionality. That is the goal and provide a measurement for how good or how bad the resilience is of a community or city. Disturbance specifies the context or type of disasters. Resist and absorb is another feature of urban resilience, but it's more related to safety rather than recovery. So as I mentioned, recover was regarded, at least by me, as the most important keywords in resilience, because it make difference between resilience and safety. And adapt or transform is another concept. That means we need to learn from the lessons and build a better city for recover from the disasters. So these concepts actually related to a few questions, few very critical questions for resilience. First of all, what's the boundary of the system? We are talking about a system. So Medicare can be a system. Power supply can be a system. And the city is also regarded as a system of system. So we need to define the system before we start to look at it. Because if you don't define the boundaries, so it's very difficult for us to clearly define the resilience. And resilience for whom? So that we make it for people. So different people different experts may have their own way to define for whom. And resilience to what? It means we use disturbance to represent various kinds of the sources of disasters. For example, flooding can be resilience to flooding can be very different with the resilience to earthquake. So, and there's another question about how long is the time span of interest for resilience, or how to define desired. That refers to the recovery as a concept. So there's many detailed understandings of resilience that can be very different, understood by different people. Okay, let me explain how we understand urban resilience. First of all, look at the two curves. The first, the blue curve represents the existing urban resilience. Before the shock come, or the disturbance come, we need to prepare for any kind of the disturbance. And when the disturbance come, that is safety issues. So if this our buildings and infrastructures could resist to this shock. If not, they get to fail or either totally or partially uh, lost their functionality. And then when the disaster goes on, they start to recover their functionality gradually back to the normal. So this is the normal process of resilience for a city. But what we need to enhance the resilience, it means we need to move the blue line, the blue curves to the red curve. That means in any aspect, we intend to leverage this curve to a higher level. However, this kind of the enhancement of the resilience may not be realized in one day or even in 1 year in expected to an expected level. Sometimes we don't have enough investment to leverage the first preparedness part, but we can invest the resources to the recovery so that when if it's really the disaster really comes, we have a capability to recover faster and better. So this I think I tried to explain how these two curves represent our understanding of resilience as part of the background I introduced. So there's many ways to understand our cities. Just now, I introduced about how we understand the resilience. So now I proposed such a model to represent our understanding about our cities. Basically, especially the visibility of a city is the physical infrastructures. It includes buildings, power system, tunnels, bridges, roads, water, and so on. So these are all physical infrastructures that support the normal everyday operation of our cities. Especially, they support the so-called social services like transportation, healthcare, governance, education, finance, and so on. These are all the needs of citizens. So we put people on the top because all the infrastructures exist because of the needs of people. So people can be the core. That's why we say people-centric approach. That starts from here because we understood how important to put people in the center of our consideration. Of course, we could have other ways to angles to look at our cities. This is an angle by system of system. So the systems in a city can be many. If you define the system as a bigger one or a smaller one, so we call it a system of system because it's all included or interconnected. The interconnected connection or the interdependence is another very typical features for our cities. And furthermore, there's also a perspective called trail space. We tried to use this framework to understand more about our cities. I mentioned about the physical space, right? And the social space is related to people and the social infrastructures. On top of the two, cyberspace is another very important one that is not neglected now because the cyber technologies uh, was part of our life. So we cannot use it for our daily lives. So we call it the true space perspective because we think if you want to look at this urban resilience, you need to consider the factors related to these true spaces or true dimensions. So we put the system of system into the true spaces. We got such a picture to understand our cities. This is also the fundamental framework for me and Nan, a few of our faculties to as a group to study the urban resilience. Okay, this is all conceptual concepts and frameworks that we developed to understand our cities, especially its resilience. Then, methodologies. We need to answer two critical questions. First, how the effects of natural hazards spread across different engineering systems, that is the physical systems, and across both physical and social dimensions. That means we cannot only consider the physical infrastructures, but also the social infrastructures or social services. This is the first question. Second, how to better use the limited resources to improve urban resilience in an effective way or optimized way. The second question was raised out because as we understood that no matter what kind of city, rich or poor, they all have limited resources. There's no cities has unlimited resources to improve their resilience because economically it's not reasonable. So in this case, if the resources is limited, then we need to allocate the critical infrastructures or critical factors that need to be leveraged with regard to resilience to make the overall resilience of a city improved in a most efficient way. So these are the two questions that we have tried for several years to answer. So the following part of my presentation is about part of the work on that. So to understand our cities, we need to understand its interdependencies based on the system of system ideas. So we have physical and geographical interdependence amongst our physical infrastructures. And furthermore, we have the interdependencies between social infrastructures and physical infrastructures and social infrastructures themselves. So we call them this kind of interdependencies as production interdependence. And then these infrastructures are all developed to serve the people So we have the functional interdependence between these infrastructures with people. So all these kind of interdependencies featured very specific questions for urban resilience because it's so complicated that we need to work out efficient and rational way to tackle with the issues. Okay, and then one of the approach we developed is the cross-system scenario deduction approach, based on the federation architect and the co-simulation of different physical infrastructures. Actually, this part is also done by Dr. Nan Lee. So we work together on this issue. So I hope there's no overlap with what Dr. Nan Lee will speak later on. So you can see once we consider the interdependencies between the the infrastructure systems, the curve of the resilience process changed quite significantly because the interdependencies amongst our systems will amplify the losses caused by a disturbance. That is represented by the red line to the yellow line in the bottom of the right hand figure. If for the recovery, if we also consider the interdependence, the recovery process can also be more efficient. It shows that the interdependencies is really a critical factor for resilience. So we need to pay enough attention on that. Of course, we, as mentioned, we need to consider how the cross-dimensional scenario can be deducted to unveil the principle how the physical space disaster losses can be transformed to societal spaces. We use the area models to study the loss and the recovery process of social infrastructures. Specifically, we looked at the influence on economy, the influence on mobility, and the influence on healthcare. The healthcare issues was actually carried out by Zai Shang. He's now working for DINA for the UNESCO chair activities. So as an example, this is still methodology. So once we understand the principles of how disturbance were transformed to losses and how the losses spread out into different systems and different dimensions in a city, we need to control it. Our target is to minimize the losses and minimize the extensions of the spreadness of the losses. So to minimize the losses from shock, from a disturbance. So one of the example presented here is that we use the biased PageRank algorithm to identify the critical infrastructures amongst our urban systems. And then we also used the multiple choice knapsack algorithm to optimize the allocation of resources. This is the resources is limited, but we need to best use of these resources. to the critical infrastructures so that we can ma maximize the effects of the investment to improve urban resilience. So now back to the core of this work, that is the people-centric infrastructure, urban structure model. In your left hand, this model was forward with the previous one to the circle, so that in this case we put people in the center. This is exactly what we mean the people-centric. And we put people in the center. It's not only by this figure. We put people in center because we want to use the people's needs or the quality of life of people to represent the functionality of our urban systems. So no matter the systems work how good, if the people's needs was not met, it doesn't mean the system function well. So we try to develop an index system to represent the human's needs. We believe that is the end. That is the final target of our urban systems. The urban systems exist. The only objective is to meet the people's needs. So we developed such an index matrix to define the human's needs. In very details, we went to the site that suffered the disasters to investigate, to talk to people, and to talk about their needs after disasters. Based on this kind of the field investigation, we developed such a matrix. So based on this matrix to represent the functionality of our urban systems, so we can have this kind of the resilience curve after a disaster. And of course, we are trying to use this curve to investigate all the details, why it's dropped down and why it comes back. There's all causes behind them. So if you look at the right figures, you can see the problem could be diagnosis based on the scenario deduction, because these three curves was all calculated by the indexes we collected, the quantified indexes we collected from the disaster site. Then we can trace back to see what causes this kind of the drop or the increase. So recently, we have tried to use the hypernetwork to model the complexity of the interconnected systems and events so that the root factors could be identified. The hypernetwork is fundamentally from the graph theory, and it was developed into the hypergraph and hypernetwork. Hypernetwork can be regarded as an approach to model various kinds of the systems, but we found it's very, very effective to model our city's functionality and the way of operation. So based on this hypernetwork modeling, we can identify the critical issues that influence the needs of people. The data actually was collected from the Citizens Information Center. If a city in China, we have such a system. The citizens has the a specific number. They can dial the number to report or complain that what kind of needs they didn't get. For example, the power supply or the water supply or the traffic issues. So that clearly represents the needs of people. So we use this information to identify the needs in the normal days or in the days after the disaster. Then I got to show you two cases how we use these methodologies to practical use. The first is the city in Manchu. It suffered the Wenchuan earthquake 16 years ago. And so we started the case study from the data source of a small city that provided us the information about the connections between different urban systems. So that we use the methodology we have just explained to deduct the scenario of the functionality of power and water supply after the disaster. And then three case hospitals was selected to study the healthcare systems, how they respond to this disaster and how they performed during the post-disaster process. So the agent and the system dynamics model was developed, and we can then simulate the process of the per hospital rescue of the injuries. So we can have such a curve that represents the capability of the hospital to serve the injured people. And then we also looked at how this kind of the disasters impact on the local economic systems. So they developed the economical models has been developed to look at the losses of the city. We also can find the difference between the industrial daily output and the retail industry daily output. The retail industrial daily output is related to the people's needs more closely. And here we have the assessment of the case study. You can see on top of the blue curves, we have the orange curve. This is also a unique idea we developed to represent the people's expectation after the disaster. As you know, we use the human-centric approach. So this curve means that we really paid attention to how the people expect. After a big disaster, no people will expect their life come to the normal in one day. So we don't need to meet this kind of the requirement. So we lower the expected the functionalities. This is actually also based on the field survey, field investigation. So based on the method we developed, we've identified the critical infrastructure nodes that need to be well protected. And we also developed the strategies for the recovery. It means the strategy means when the next disaster comes, how to better recover from the losses. So that you can see different strategies may have different effectiveness. Of course, we need to optimize the strategies to meet the humans' needs. Another case study is in Beijing after the rainstorm, but I think my time is running over, so I'll try to go very quickly. This is a rainstorm, so this is the case area in Beijing, and we use this kind of the models to collect the information from the people's complaination or the blames through the citizen service phone number, so that based on this information, that we can clearly understand the needs of people after the disaster and how we monitor the data every day, so you can see the curves changes from time to time. It's gradually recovered. So we do this is to study how could we do it better to make the recovery quicker and better. So these three curves actually shows that the recovery of the different layers of the needs. Let me go through it quicker. So then we go back to the disaster to compare our investigation with the actual cases in Beijing. We found it generally it matches well, but there are really some factors with the difference. So the differences is also the interest of our study. So it's still on the way. We try to use the differences to identify what kind of the human needs was not met well by our infrastructures. It's still on the way. So then, again, based on the decoding of resilience curves, we can identify the defects of the services of the city to people. And then this all targeting to better services for the next disaster. So I got to skip these details because it's hard to display in a short time. Okay, then based on all the fundamental and practical study, our works also was part of the support of the governmental policy making in Beijing and in big projects like the Winter Olympic venue construction. So in conclusion, I would say a quantitative human-centric framework was proposed by several of our publications that is trying to use human needs as the functionality of a city's function quantification. So and a cross-system and cross-dimensional approach was proposed based on the scenario simulation and deduction to describe the diffusion of post-disaster losses, which enabled the identification of key infrastructure and better allocation of limited resources for quick recovery. A multi-layer hypernetwork model was developed to analyze the post-disaster recovery process based on hyper-edge evolution. And there's quite a number of these kind of the indexes that we are now working on. This model is able to review urban disaster dynamics and recovery patterns to facilitate the development of effective post-disaster recovery strategies. These approaches were used to revisit the 2008 earthquake in Mianzhu and the 2023 extreme rainstorm in Beijing to explore better ways of efficient improvement of urban resilience. So this is the what I would like to share with you of our work in the past few years. These are some of the publications we had for in this area. Okay, thank you, Dina, again for your invitation, and thank you for your patience to listen. So the following is my team, that's Nan Li, Zai Shang, and a few of my PhD students is included for we work together to work as above mentioned. Thank you and have a nice day.
Thank you very much, Dongping, for this excellent presentations. We will leave questions to the end of the next presentation for both speakers so that we can have a more comprehensive debate. So, Dr. Nan Li, if you would like to share your screen and start your presentation, that would be perfect.
Yeah, sure. Let's see. Okay, can everyone see my screen and me?
Not yet. Yes, now we can see your screen and
okay. All right. Hello everyone. Good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you are. So before I get started, I would like to also express my sincere gratitude to Professor Dina Diayala and Professor Li for inviting me to this UNESCO Chair Seminar. Following the presentation by Professor Dongping Fan, so what I'm going to share today will primarily focus on what we have studied in the past few years about the behavior of human beings in the event of disaster or extreme events at different spatial scales. First of all, some quick background. So I think, as Professor Dongping Fan has provided a very comprehensive background and the context of the research that we're doing at Tsinghua, so I can be very brief with my background. So as everyone knows, that cities are frequently threatened by various types of disaster risks, whether natural or man-made or decoupling disasters. And we've just seen this figure a few minutes ago. At the top layer, you can see there are different needs of human beings that need to be satisfied. Some of them are related to survival and safety. So if we look at what people experience during extreme events, we realize that, a lot of times evacuation is triggered as people feel threatened and their survival needs or safety needs cannot be fulfilled. And so that they need to take appropriate actions. Beyond that, there are social needs and spiritual needs and etc. Needs that people seek to satisfy beyond fundamental survival or safety. So what we see again in the disaster context is that a lot of times people's activities and their whereabouts are disturbed, although they may not be exposed to immediate safety threats. Their well-being could also be impacted due to such disturbances to their normal daily activities. And that would undermine their ability to fulfill their own social and spiritual needs. If we look at some statistics using China as an example, we will realize that, well, it remains still quite challenging to meet the needs, either the survival and the safety aspect, or the social and spiritual aspects. Particularly, we see that the consistently high number of evacuees during natural disaster in China, where people feel threatened by the extreme events, as well as the huge number of population that are affected by natural disaster in one way or another, indicating the widespread impact of the disaster events on the more advanced social and spiritual needs of the mass population. In order to understand the disaster impacts on humans' needs, one key aspect is you need to look at the human behavior in the cities, because the behaviors not only reflect the level of disturbances that people are experiencing, but also could provide important angles for us to guide us to develop measures to deal with such an impacts. So in the past few years, the group that I'm leading in Tsinghua, we have looked into the human behavior in response to extreme events at two different scales, both at the indoors space or the building scale, as well as the larger urban space at the city scale. And the rest of my talk is actually organized along, the human behavior studies that have been conducted at these two levels. First of all, human behavior in indoor spaces. What we focus on is the assault, how people respond to threats like fires and earthquakes when they are in indoor spaces. Because our indoor spaces are frequently threatened by such threats. And when this fire or earthquakes happen, efficient evacuation is actually the key to mitigate such risks of casualties and other related risks. And human behaviors during evacuation in the indoor environment is actually highly complex. Examples of such complexity are the hoarding effect, the fastest slow phenomena, and competitive behavior or non-adaptive behaviors, which would further complicate the disaster scenario and bring negative influence to the outcomes of the evacuation actions. There has been actually decades of research into human evacuation behavior in indoor environments because of its significance. People have been using different approaches like case study, simulation, field experiments, drills, etc., to understand how crowds of people would behave and to come up with simulation models to predict the outcomes of the evacuation, the likely fatality rates, etc. One gap with existing research, however, is that if we look at the human evacuation behavior, they actually happen at particular levels. The macro level, meaning the entire crowd, and which is the primary focus of existing research. But at the same time, there are another levels. The lower levels, the micro level, that is individual level, to understand how each individual perceive the environment and make their own wayfinding and exit choices. And between them, there's also the meso level, meaning the groups. So individuals, they form certain groups that are characterized by certain relationships, like a kinship, friendship, colleagueship, etc. So the groups, they are also the basic building blocks of the entire crowd, and they also have important influence on the behavior of every individual that form those groups. However, the research into the individual level and the group level of the diffusion behavior has remained limited so far. And the main reason is the limited access to trustworthy and reliable behavioral data. So to overcome this challenge, what we have tried in the past few years is to introduce virtual reality-based approach, which would allow us to create an immersive virtual environment and immerse our participants in them. And by doing that, we can arouse the emotional and behavioral responses of our experimental participants, and providing us with these physiological and psychological data, both objective and sometimes subjective, to allow us to understand their cognitive decision-making processes, develop their decision-making models, and to allow us to better explain and predict their responsive behaviors during firewall evaluations. So,
Sorry, Dr. Lee, there is a little
yes.
bit of echo, and your voice doesn't come as sharp as it could. Maybe you can speak a bit louder.
Okay. Is it better if I do this like, hello? Is it better?
A little bit, but not much.
Okay. I'll try to speak up a little bit more.
Yes,
So,
please.
okay. In order to implement such a virtual reality based evacuation research paradigm, so we developed a process model that methodologically guides us to design and implement such VR-enabled experiment. We also have developed technical tools that would allow us to, develop multi-sensory interactions between the virtual scenes and our participants, which would, make them feel immersed and feel real and exhibit the evacuation behaviors that they would do as if in the real world evacuation scenarios. So this short video shows, the first person view and the third person view of our experimental scenes, and as well as some of the apparatus that we have developed to conduct the evacuation experiments. On the right is actually showing one participant running in a virtual metro station that is caught in a fire incident, and the participant can not only see the virtual scene but also feel the heat and the smell, the burning stuff, and etc. So using this VR enabled experimental approach, we have conducted a series of experiments, which has allowed us to understand much better what behavior people would exhibit during evacuation, why these behaviors happen, and how we would predict their future occurrences, etc. To give a few examples, I would I probably don't have time to go into the details of each experiment, but to give some quick example, we first studied how different modes of spatial exploration into new environments would influence people's behaviors during evacuation. So people could, when people come to a new space, they could explore the space freely, or they could follow certain routes to explore the entire space, as people would do it in a museum. So we tested the different modes of exploration and found that passive exploration was actually more helpful for people to react when if they are caught in a fire, because passive exploration builds on simple and fixed memories and would avoid information overload compared to active exploration. And we also explored, how an individual would not only make an individual decision, but also interact with others. So we simulated the different phenomena of different choices of the crowds, whether people go or everyone goes into the same direction or they go in different directions in a different splitting patterns. And we observed that if an individual sees these different splits of the crowd, how would the individual react? Would the individual follow them? Or would they be acting more independently, etc.? What we found is that actually participants did tend to follow the crowd during evacuation. And this tendency was reinforced over time because the participant may need to make multiple decisions, going through different crossroads. And during the process, the tendency to follow was reinforced. We actually replicated this the same experiment in Beijing, in London, in Los Angeles, and interestingly, we did not observe any cultural differences in this regard. So what we found was more or less consistent across different cultures. We also tested, at the group level, right? So sometimes people may be influenced by the social relationship. So we created different types of social groups in a virtual emotional scenario and try to understand how the strength of such relationship would influence their responses. For instance, the acquaintance, would they have a less strong social ties compared to friends, and the family and they have the stronger social ties than friends. So we observed that the stronger the social ties is, then the closer they stay together during processes, and this would mean lower stress, mental stress, because they would feel more safe, and also they would spend a longer pre-evacuation time because it requires a little bit more time for them to coordinate and reach consensus. But then shorter evacuation time and distance, meaning that once the group has made a decision, the stronger ties they have, the faster they act, and the sooner they will reach to the safe zone. And we also, studied how the group behavior influence individuals. Sometimes the group may split into smaller groups. What is the splitting patterns and etc. Due to time constraint, I'm not going into the details of the experiment. And beyond, what I just described, one challenge, or actually I would say one question we've been thinking is that the majority of the VR experiments are done in the lab environment, which means that a lot university students as participants, which could introduce possible biases. And bringing people to the lab also requires space and equipment and the travel expenses, etc. So which would again allow us to access a larger pool of participants with a diverse background and a geographical diversity and representative. So what we have very recently started to experiment with is what we call a crowdsourced virtual reality experiment approach. Which means that we are trying to move the experiments from a physical lab environment to an online environment, creating an online platform where we would be allowed to access a diverse group of participants through an open call or invitation extended to the public. And this is made possible in recent years because there is a growing population of VR users. A lot of people now have their own VR equipment for entertainment purposes, so we can actually recruit them in our experiment, no matter where they are, no matter what job, what gender, or what age they are. They can all, volunteer themselves and their devices to our experiments and interact socially in an online experiment. And as researcher, we manage and observe these processes and collect the data we need. So this is what we're trying to do recently. So we have recently just developed such an online platform and conducted several, preliminary experiments to validate this approach and the platform. Inspiringly, so our pilot studies shows that the experiments conducted online could successfully replicate several classic phenomena, including the self-organization phenomena and the zipper effect phenomena, which gives us a lot of confidence that, well, going online and using such a crowd sourced approach would indeed, produce reliable experimental data in terms of human responsive behaviors. We would also, significantly increase the representativeness of our participants. So that's what we have studied at the building scale. And then the second half of my presentation will provide a quick overview of what we have done to understand human behavior in the city scale during extreme weather. At the city scale, so people's behavior will be classified into broad categories. One is again referencing back to the people needs diagram we saw at the beginning. People sometimes may need to evacuate or be relocated during, for instance, hurricanes and typhoons. Right, they have to leave their home temporarily to avoid risks. And also sometimes people may not need to be relocated, but their travel patterns may have to be changed as the consequence of the extreme events. So if they change their travel means, their travel patterns, or their modes of the travels, etc., that means that the activities associated with that trip are also interrupted. For instance, people may have reduced their capability to access the food, to have say to acquire certain surfaces, etc. Our research try to understand these two types of disturbance by understanding and mining their behavior data. So at the urban scale, the challenge is actually not to generate or access the data. Thanks to the recent development in ICT technologies, there's actually a growing accessibility to the trajectory data at the community and the city scales. And we have collected quite some of such data from our partners in China and in several other countries. The challenge is actually how to mine such data so that we can, extract the knowledge that we need to understand people's behaviors and disturbances during extreme events. So we have done several things in the past few years. So first of all, we have come up with a quantitative analytical framework that would allow us to quantitatively capture and measure the type and the level of disturbances that people experience in terms of their mobility patterns. So we can measure to what extent that people have reduced their visited locations, have restricted their movement range, have increased their waiting time or stay time at certain locations, and the overall pattern changes in the daily routines. By correlating with such data with the demographics data, we can further, identify different types of disturbances that people experience. For instance, some people actually are barely affected by the disasters, such as typhoon. Some other people are weakly affected. Certain groups are actually highly affected, and they are quite vulnerable. And we can, using certain demographic attributes, we would actually be able to identify such a vulnerable group and prepare them for the significant impacts ahead of time. And a few people actually are positively affected, meaning they visit more locations, they have less waiting time, and they seem to be more active in the urban space during extreme events. So our measures to mitigate or contain the disaster impacts should be developed in a more targeted way to serving the needs of different types of groups, experiencing different levels and magnitudes of such risks. And again, focusing on the evacuation phenomena where people seek asylum or temporary shelter to ensure their own safety. We have studied that once people are relocated to new communities, what they are experiencing. So by studying a hurricane case in Houston in the US, we observed that the evacuees actually could come from any community in the city, not just along where the landslides of the hurricane is. So the figure on the top right shows that the level of losses of residents of each community. Right, the darker the color is, the more evacuees they have left their own homes. What we have found an interesting phenomenon is that, well, once the people evacuate to other communities, supposedly, well, they should be supported by the communities that they move into, but in reality, they are actually experiencing a higher level of isolation, meaning that they are not interaction that much with the community who hosted them temporarily during the events. Instead, well, the interaction is highly limited. The host population level of isolation is also limited, meaning that the evacuees and the population of the host community, they tend to stay away from each other, not providing the badly needed support at such difficult times. And this suggested that actually a lot more has to be done beyond simply moving people from dangerous areas to safe zones. And there are several other studies that we've conducted. One is to understand how people's access to different types of surfaces could be impacted by the extreme events. So we have developed a metric to measure the dynamic accessibility of people to different types of surfaces during extreme events, considering both their own attributes and the travel costs to different locations, as well as the interactions between people and the facilities. well, compared to traditional accessibility metrics which are mostly dynamic, our metric proves to be able to capture the dynamic and the significant changes of accessibility during the disaster events. For instance, the figures on the top show that, well, during the hurricane events, people's access to eating places and grocery stores would reduce significantly before bouncing back afterwards. Using this metric, we can also further study some social phenomena. For instance, we observe that the inequality in terms of access to food services would actually increase during disaster events, meaning that well, the richer people tend to have a higher accessibility to food services than the lower income groups compared to normal times. Such inequality, however, would decrease in terms of retail services, meaning that people have a relatively a higher level of equal access to retail services when the disaster happened. These metrics and the social phenomena that we review would also help us to understand the social dynamics during extreme events and develop certain measures to mitigate or strengthen some of the effects. We have also studied, how people's consumption activities would change during the extreme events. Well, a lot of the point of interest in the cities like restaurants, like shopping malls, grocery stores, people go there to consume, to spend money. And during this process, they meet people and create a social interactions. And this is actually a very important way for the community to develop that social capital, which has a lot of influence on the overall capacity of the community to deal with the extreme events. So what we observe using a metric that we have developed in our research is that the social segregation during this at this consumption point of interest actually would fluctuate during disasters. The intra-group mobility increases, meaning that people interact more with people from the same income level group, and the intergroup mobility would decrease, meaning that people interact less with people from other income groups. And as a consequence, the level of segregation, social segregation experienced by income groups would magnify and polarize. People tend to interact more with people from the same income group. They tend to spend. They tend to group at the consumption point of interest, so together with people from the same income group. And this would actually bring about a negative influence on how the community as a group respond to such difficult times. And then in addition to understand the dynamics, social dynamics by mining the data, we have also tried to develop some mobility models to understand the fundamental mechanisms behind the people's mobility behavior during normal times as well as during disasters, and to predict their trajectory and mobility patterns in disaster contexts. Due to time constraint, I'm not going to go into details of models, but briefly speaking, so we have developed one model at the individual level, try to understand that people's decision making in terms of choosing the next in terms of choosing the next destination at the two levels. One is an inter-cluster level, one is intra-cluster level, meaning that if people decide to choose the next place to visit, we would first choose from a cluster of neighboring locations that have a similar functionalities. and then choose one particular location from this cluster of locations. We have developed a model around this two-level mechanism and have effectively reproduced and outperformed existing models in terms of the location destination prediction. And interestingly, we have observed such a cluster effect in several other types of human behaviors, not just mobility, but also people's visitation to particular type of point of interest, their online shopping, as well as their social networking at the cyberspaces. So we could use the mechanism that we have developed to similarly explain and predict people's behavior in these scenarios. And also at the population level, we have developed a model which outperforms the existing gravity model in terms of explaining the amount of flow between different locations in the cities. And our model can also provide not only a regular daily but also at the hourly temporal granularity, and also performs better than existing model in the disaster context. And beyond that, we have also developed some approaches and metrics to allow us to predict the extreme conditions where the whole city may lose the connectivity, and have developed a certain the indicators that would allow us to provide some early warning in terms of when a city may completely lose the spatial connectivity and the urban space may become highly fragmented. So I guess I'm running out of time, so I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that people may, if people are interested in early warning and prediction work that we have. So yeah, so lastly, a quick summary. We have spent quite much time in the past few years studying humans' behavior in response to disaster events, both at the building scale and at the urban scale, and have developed different experimental approaches, have different data mining approaches, and have reviewed different behavioral mechanisms, developed behavioral models. And we are hoping that this knowledge, the tools can be translated into actionable measures in the resilience management practices in the very near future to help further strengthen and improve the resilience capacity of our cities and make our cities safer. So that'll be all that I'd like to share today. This is the website to our lab, which both Professor Dumpivan and I myself are leading, and also the QR code of the WeChat account of our group. So we regularly post our recent news and publications and events of our group there. So I think that's all. Thank you very much, everyone, for listening.
Thank you very much, Nan Li, for this very interesting presentation, very complementary to the first one. I think we have a number of questions that are already in the Q&A. If other viewers and listener wants to ask other question, please write it up in the Q&A, and then we will give you the opportunity also to have a more direct debate with our speakers, but Zhe-Shang Li now will take care of the Q&A. Thanks.
Yes. Okay. Thank you to both of our guest speakers. So let's move on to our Q&A session. The first question from Peter. The question is, where does food come into your model? I think this question we can invite Professor Dong Pingfang to ask it.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, yeah, The food is actually indicated in in our system, but we didn't do in-depth investigation on this issue, because now the food supply, especially in China, no matter how big the disaster is, the food supply is always there. So especially there's now semi-ready food, various kinds of this kind of food. So we have many ways to transport this food to the disasters by the UAV or by various kinds of the tools. So we didn't look into details, but this is an issue. Is definitely an issue for many other places and countries. But our methodology has the capability to take this into consideration without any big obstacles. So this is for the first question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Fang. The second question is about the right diagram on the slide 20 in your presentation. The diagram is not affected by the severity of disaster itself. Like the more severe the disaster is, the lower the line would be. Professor Fang, would you please? Yeah.
Yes, definitely. This is the case. And with a different kind of disasters, the curve can be very different, the same as the severity. So actually, we did a lot more research on the earthquake. As always, we use the 0.1 G, 0.2 G, 0.3 G as the input of the earthquake, so that we can get very different resilient curves. Yes, you are correct.
Okay, thank you. And the third question is still for you. Jun asked, if there are really related academic projects that I can devote myself to these meaningful events.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your interest. We will let you know through Zaishan or Dina if you are interested in. Thank you.
Okay. Then the question from Krasimir. At the beginning, I would like to thank you for the interesting lecture. I would express my doubt about is there any other way of assessing critical infrastructure than the human-centric one. Also, according to my own experience, people of different cultural differences behave differently in the event of disasters. Highly integrated societies with a sense of belonging to the community overcome difficulties more easily, and a larger number of residents are actively involved in rescuing or providing assistance to the victims. Of course, robust critical infrastructure is imperative, but in old European cities, critical roads also depends on the resilience of the buildings along those roads. Therefore, I believe that critical infrastructure resilience assessment must be viewed exclusively as specific solutions for a specific environment.
Yeah, thank you for the question, and it's a wonderful question. I really fully agree with your comments, and definitely critical infrastructure is definitely not the only one solution. I just use it as an example. We also looked at other many aspects, the cultural issues as well. So definitely due to this consideration, we choose to use the resilience curve as the main approach for our investigation. Because if you look at many of the related studies, they directly bring out a matrix with all the indicators of resilience related factors in it, and they don't look at the process, the time dependent process of the for resilience. The reason why we choose to use this, because the scenario-based approach can specifically solve the specific problems of a specific city faced with. So in this case, if we have the information of a specific city, including the cultural difference, influence the geometrical difference, we can provide different investigations and different solutions. Very good question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Bang. Okay, our next question, I think, is for both of you, Professor Fang and Professor Nan Li. Professor Daya Shankar said it is generally said that disasters don't kill people, but infrastructures do. Who is responsible? People, builders, governmental officials, designers, or someone else become the hindrance to make the urban cities resilient. Who is answerable after disasters happen? We always blame to poor people, but the reality is somewhere else.
Yeah, again, very good question. You are right. I always say the same, that the infrastructures do, yes. But when the infrastructures fail, then the responsibility issues come. However, I would say that the human beings' knowledge and experience on disasters is not enough to make a city safe enough. So you can it's very difficult to identify the responsibilities, but I think the government or the societies bring out the code, the specifications for buildings, for infrastructures that need to be a part of the resilient consideration. It means when we develop or modify our codes, we need to take resilient issues into consideration so that the people will be better protected. But if you expect that all these things are perfect to protect people 100%, I don't agree. Because we as I mentioned, the monetary issue is another problem. We don't have enough money to protect all kinds of the disasters. So everybody is responsible for this kind of things, because if they're even a poor people, if you have more experience in how to evacuate from the disaster, the damage, then you can survive. And for the rich people, the same. But equality for the resilience is definitely an issue. So we also did some studies on this for the equality issues. Yeah, it's a very difficult question to answer very clearly. But I think maybe Dr. Li may have some supplement on that. Sorry.
Yeah, in principle, I very much agree with what Professor Dong Fang has said. Well, everyone is responsible and they should be involved, providing support to themselves as well as to each other during this difficult times. And by saying everyone, not saying just as a regular citizen, but also the government and the social organizations and should play a big role in providing the necessary information, providing the resources, coordinate, or sometimes support themselves so that that the burden placed on the society could be reduced.
Okay, thank you both. I think the next question is for Professor Nan Li. What behavioral changes you can recommend to make people safe from disaster, both in the indoor and urban spaces?
Okay. Well, I think the one of the goal why we study human behavior is probably not to not to make people to adapt their behavior autonomously, but rather to help us develop measures to somehow change their behavior. For instance, if we understand how people process different information and make the wayfinding decisions in indoor action processes, and then we could know what kind of signage we could design and where to place them, and what kind of broadcasts we should use to disseminate the information, giving instruction. And what kind of behavioral phenomenon is an indicative of certain dangers that could trigger some management responses. So at the urban scale, similarly, I think the measures that the metrics that we develop and use to capture people's access to different services would allow us to optimize the spatial planning of the different, say, healthcare facilities, retail facilities, etc. And the level of inequality phenomena that we observe during disaster events would allow us to somehow develop certain measures to encourage people from certain groups to better utilize certain services, and this could be facilitated by easier access, specialized or the easier transportation measures, etc., that could be provided by the government. And this would somehow to support the residents and induce certain positive behavior changes.
I have a sort of extra question here, and as we are discussing these specific issues, and then the other question are changing a little bit.
Please.
So as a result of your study on human behavior, both in building and at an urban level, have you identified specific structural adaptations for the infrastructures that could actually benefit or change the human behavior or adapt to human behavior so that let's say we reduce the casualty or we reduce the problem?
That's a very good question. To be honest, we are not quite there yet. We haven't systematically investigated these questions, but we do have some very preliminary observations from our the results that we already have. For instance, we observed that the spatial distribution of the facilities is a major factor that drives the level of inequality in terms of the retail access during disasters, but not so much on the food or eating places. So meaning that the spatial distribution and the spatial planning plays a different role for different types of services. So this could help us, to customize the space planning strategy for different types of services, whether being healthcare or education. And the second observation that we have is that the disturbances to that traffic behavior is largely tied to the condition of the transportation condition and transportation facility. So to provide a better access to certain facilities or for certain groups, then it's very critical to ensure that they have access to transportation services during extreme events, whether it be in public transportation or the private transportation. So very preliminary thoughts.
Thank you. No, very interesting. Thank you very much. And we look forward to see more outcomes of this type, of course. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So next question is still for Professor Fang from Weiwei. She asked, how does the PageRank algorithm work in the system of the system? And how does the result affect the next step, analyzing the risk resilience in the whole urban area?
Thanks, Wei, for the question. It takes time to answer. So I think I get to send you the publications we have to that you can go into details of the methodology. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Fang. The next question is, with regard to cascading hazards, how the trail model focus on changing dynamics, especially urban areas, where we're faced with multiple disaster impacts.
Okay. The trail model is mainly deal with the different aspect of the urban systems. So it means that we need to consider the impact of the society and the cyberspaces to the infrastructure, or vice versa. In the same time, when we look at any part of the resilience issues. So for multiple disaster impacts, I think the same. So it's very complicated, but whenever we look at a resilient issue, we need to think about the trail spaces, not only one species. This is what we are indicating. We looked at all the relationships in some specific issues, but we cannot look all of them, answer all the questions right now.
Okay, thank you. The next question is about the equity. What impact does the integration of human-centered and data-driven approaches have on the equity and inclusivity of urban resilience strategies?
Very good question, I have to say. I think the human-centered or the data-driven is the general approach we used to look at the urban resilience issues. As for the equity and the inclusivity issues, I think it's part of the in the trail spaces is part of the societal issues that definitely need to be considered, especially the equity issues. We are now, one of my PhD students is looking at what can I say? The reachability of the critical infrastructure, such as the hospitals, compared with the poor people and the rich people. So we try to identify the key issues in this related to equity, and then develop the policy tools to tackle with this problem. But it's on the way. I cannot have I just I can what I can tell you is that we are working on that, but there's no conclusions yet. Thank you. Very challenging question.
Yeah, and also to add my 2 cents, well, I think by relying more on data, we actually it actually created a pathway for us to consider everyone, because the data doesn't lie. So for instance, when we collected the driver data, we don't sample them based on the ethnic groups or the income groups, right? So we actually randomly sample the entire population, which means that whatever we study all groups. That improves the level of inclusivity. In a way that every group has a voice in the data that we collected, the conclusion that we draw from the data.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think the next question is a little bit similar to this question. How can cities ensure that data-driven resilience initiatives do not overlook the needs and the values of marginalized communities?
I think no city can ensure that any kind of the approaches do not overlook the needs, but we try to try to correctly or value assess the needs in a right way, but nobody can ensure there's no any overlook. Maybe not can supplement some of the ideas.
Well, yeah. So I think this has to do with the governance and the management. So from a scholar's perspective, I think what we can do is to provide those policymakers with reality of how different groups, particularly the marginalized groups, are influenced, or how they deal with the disaster, and what they actually need, and what measures could help them in what way. And then I think the rest is more or less up to the policymakers to decide how much they would, follow the suggestion or advice from scholars.
I think a natural question here, which I open to both of you, is how much do you use sociological and anthropological methods in analyzing data on issues that have clear societal input in it? And how much do you work interdisciplinary with other colleagues to actually support that very important aspect of the societal resilience?
I've been actually doing a couple of things, or we are making several efforts. So one is, we would develop actually a metric to measure the level of resilience inequality across the city. So I will measure that how to what level of to what extent the different communities or different regions within the city have different level of resilience. Some communities may be more resilient, some communities may be less. But how big is the gap? So we're measuring that and incorporating that as one of the goals in the decision making model in terms of planning the repair sequences of infrastructures, so that we encourage the policymakers to adopt such a model so that they not only optimize the efficiency, the time and expenses, but also to somehow improve the level of equality of the resilience across different communities. And the second thing that we are discussing with a colleague from the sociology department to understand better what the social capital means in the disaster context, and they try to come up with the measures to assess, to quantify the level of social capital by using the people's trajectory data activity data that was collected. So hopefully that would help us explain the sources of the social capital and the measures that we can strengthen it.
Thank you, Nan. And I think there are a couple of more questions if you are still strength to answer them.
Yes, we have three questions now. The first one is a technical one. It's about the graph theory. What are the differences between hypernetwork and graph? I think it's for Professor Fang.
Okay, the graph theory shows the interlink of the nodes. But the hypernetwork is based on the hypergraph. It's developed from the graph theory, but it can represent more layers of the graph and shows and represents the linkage. It's called hyperedge. That is the new concept that we used to tackle with our problems. So we also have a paper published a few months ago. I think if you search the data bank, you will find the paper. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's move on to the next question. Are there any tutorials for early career researchers in human-centered resilience assessment? Do we have some?
I think I'm afraid that we don't have right now. Thank you. Thank you for your
Maybe we will
interest.
organize a special course, a special 2-day course for this in the near future.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Now our last question is, what are the challenges and opportunities in balancing human-centered approaches with data-driven decision-making for urban resilience?
I would say that these two approaches should work together. We don't have to balance the two, but we need to integrate them into a holistic approach to force urban resilience.
Thank you. Okay. Now I think we've addressed all the questions, Dana.
Thank you very much to our speakers, Dr. Fang, Professor Fang and Professor Lee, for a very interesting and stimulating set of lectures, and so stimulating that indeed also the question and answer sessions and the debate was very, very interesting. We have 3 minutes to the end, so if there is any other very burning questions that any of our audience would like to throw up, or any remarks that you would like to mention, we can open your microphone if you are so inclined. Just give it a moment. Otherwise, we will close this session, thanking again our speakers and all the audience for a very stimulating sessions. And in the usual manner, thank you again to Professor Fang and Professor Lee for entertaining us for the past 2 hours. And see you all next month for the next installment of our UNESCO Chair in Disaster Risk Reduction and Resilience Engineering webinars. Thank you again all, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Ina, for your
Bye-bye.
invitation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you all.